Hey dear, welcome. Tonight, we're stepping into a place people think of as peaceful, quiet, and safe. Stone walls, candlelight, soft chanting echoing through cold corridors. A medieval monastery, not as a visiting noble, not as a pilgrim passing through for soup and blessings, and definitely not as an abbot with a warm chamber and authority. Tonight, you dropped unprepared into a world where silence is law, hunger is virtue, and obedience matters more than comfort, truth, or even sleep. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to imagine voices drifting in from across the world, all of us awake together, while history watches quietly. Now dim the lights. Lower the volume just enough to feel like you're leaning in. Maybe let the room cool a little, and let's begin. You don't wake up gently. There's no sunrise filtering through stained glass, no slow stretch, no sense of readiness. You wake up because a bell says you must. It's still dark, deep dark. The kind that presses against your eyes when you open them. The bell doesn't ring to be polite. It rings to command. And somewhere in the stone above you, below you, all around you, other bodies are rising in the same stunned silence. Congratulations! You've just woken up in a medieval monastery. Your bed is a narrow wooden frame topped with straw that crackles when you move. Your blanket is coarse, thin, and smells faintly of damp wool and old smoke. The air is cold enough to sting your lungs when you inhale, even in summer. There are no personal rooms here, no privacy, no mirrors, no belongings worth naming, just rows of identical bodies, identical habits, identical lives. You don't speak. You're not allowed to. Talking isn't forbidden because it's rude. It's forbidden because it reminds you that you are an individual, and individuality, the first thing this place is designed to remove. You pull yourself upright, joints aver, eyes burning, and join the slow shuffle toward the chapel. Bare feet on stone, breath fogging in the darkness. A life reduced to movement and compliance. You haven't eaten yet. You won't for hours. You haven't truly slept. You won't tonight either. And as you take your place in the cold chapel, standing shoulder to shoulder with figures you are never allowed to truly know, one thing becomes very clear. This place isn't meant to comfort you. It's meant to empty you. Welcome to the monastery. You're not here to find peace. You're here to endure it. And you've still got a very long day ahead. So let the story begin. People imagine monasteries as places of rest. They picture sunlight pouring through narrow windows, dust floating gently in the air, monks moving slowly through cloisters with peaceful expressions and empty minds. They imagine silence as relief, routine as comfort, withdrawal from the world as healing. They imagine this place as an escape from noise, from violence, from ambition, from hunger for more. A monastery, they think, is where you go when you've had enough of the world. But that's not why monasteries exist, and it's not what they were built to do. You didn't come here to be soothed. You didn't come here to recover, and you certainly didn't come here to feel safe. You came here to be reshaped, stone by stone, habit by habit, thought by thought. The medieval monastery is not a sanctuary from suffering. It is a machine designed to produce a specific kind of human being, quiet, obedient, enduring, and emptied of self. That's the part no one tells you. The silence isn't for peace, it's for control. The routine isn't for stability, it's for submission. And the isolation isn't meant to protect you from the world. It's meant to strip the world out of you. You arrive believing you are choosing this life. That illusion won't last long. Because from the moment you cross the threshold, nothing belongs to you anymore. Not your time, not your body, not your thoughts, not even your suffering. Those now belong to the rule. The monastery does not care who you were before you arrived. Whether you were poor or educated, whether you came here willingly or were sent away by a family that could not afford you, whether you were seeking God or hiding from shame, inside these walls, all that history dissolves. You are no longer a person with a past. You are a body to be disciplined, a voice to be synchronized, a will to be broken gently, patiently, and completely. There is no dramatic welcome, no speech, no reassurance, no moment of reflection, just stone corridors that swallow sound, and eyes trained forward, and the quiet understanding that everything familiar has been left behind outside the gate. This place is old, not just in years, but in intention. Every wall, every rule, every hour of the day was designed with one purpose in mind: to make you small enough to disappear into obedience. And at first, it doesn't feel threatening. That's the trick. It feels calm, orderly, strained. You mistake that for kindness. But calm can be a weapon, and order, when it never bends, can grind a person down faster than chaos ever could. The monastery doesn't rush you. It doesn't need to. It has time. The first thing you notice is how quiet everything is. Not the peaceful kind of quiet people talk about when they are trying to sell you a retreat. Not birdsong and wine through trees. This is a heavier silence. A managed silence. The kind that feels intentional, like a rule you're already breaking just by breathing too loudly. Sound behaves differently here. Footsteps don't echo the way you expect. Voices, when they exist at all, are subdued, clipped, almost ashamed of themselves. Doors close without slamming. Tools are set down carefully. Even coughs seem restrained, swallowed back into the chest, as if illness itself might be seen as a form of disobedience. At first, it's almost comforting. The world outside was loud, chaotic, demanding, markets shouting, animals crying, children pulling at sleeves, lords issuing commands. The constant pressure to react, respond, survive. Here, none of that follows you in. No one asks your opinion. No one demands your attention. No one cares what you think. And for a moment, that feels like relief. You tell yourself this is what peace feels like. But peace is not the absence of noise. Peace is the presence of choice. And here, choice has already begun to vanish. You're given a habit. Rough wool, undyed, unadorned. It scratches at your skin, especially at the neck and wrists, where it never quite settles comfortably. You don't adjust it too much. Drawing attention to your body is discouraged. Comfort is suspicious. Your hair is cut short. If you are a man, it's shaved into a tonsure, the crown of your head left bare, exposed to cold and sun alike. If you are a woman, it's covered, bound, hidden from sight. Either way, your appearance is no longer yours. Mirrors are rare. Vanity is a sin. Self-recognition is unnecessary. You learn quickly that even posture matters. Head bowed, eyes lowered, hands occupied or folded. Stillness is praised. Fidgeting is not. No one explains everything at once. That would be too merciful. Instead, you learn by correction. A look held too long earns a sharp glance in return. A step out of rhythm draws a whispered rebuke. A question asked at the wrong moment is met with silence, so heavy it feels like punishment. You begin to anticipate the rules before they're spoken. That's how the monastery prefers it. The structure here is absolute, but it is not loud about it. It doesn't shout its authority. It simply exists, immovable, and waits for you to collide with it. And you will. Everyone does. The day is divided not by hunger or fatigue, but by bells. Time here does not belong to the sun. It belongs to sound. The bell decides when you wake. The bell decides when you pray. The bell decides when you work. The bell decides when you eat. The bell decides when you rest. Your body's natural rhythms are irrelevant. If you are tired, that is your problem. If you are hungry, that is a test. If you are in pain, that is instruction. The monastery does not adapt to you. You adapt to it, or you fail quietly. Failure here is not dramatic. No one yells. No one expels you in a fit of anger. Instead, failure is slow and inward. A tightening of expectations, a narrowing of tolerance, extra fasts, longer prayers, isolation disguised as reflection, all of it framed as care, all of it eroding you piece by piece. And still, in these early moments, you cling to the idea that this was your decision, that you came here seeking something higher, that this discipline will bring clarity, meaning, salvation. You tell yourself that discomfort is temporary, that you just need to adjust. You haven't yet realized that adjustment is the point. There is a moment, usually very early on, when it starts to sink in that this place is not interested in your comfort, your healing, or your personal journey. It is interested in consistency. The monastery does not care how you feel today. It cares how you behave every day. The same prayers, the same movements, the same hours, over and over again. At first, you try to hold on to meaning. You listen closely to the words being spoken, trying to follow the rhythm, to understand the Latin phrases as they pass over your tongue. You tell yourself that if you concentrate hard enough, if you're sincere enough, something will click, something holy, something reassuring, something worth the discomfort. But the days don't reward effort with revelation, they reward obedience with silence. Soon, the words blur together. The chants stop feeling like sentences and start feeling like sounds. Your mouth moves automatically. Your voice joins the others not because you're inspired, but because stopping would stand out. And standing out here is dangerous. Individuality is not celebrated, it is corrected. You learn this in small ways. A pause half a second too long before standing. A breath taken at the wrong time. A face that looks too expressive during prayer. None of it is dramatic. There are no speeches about failure, no lectures about your soul. Just a look, a note taken, a quiet reminder later that humility must be practiced more diligently. And so you begin to flatten yourself. Your reactions soften, your expressions dull, your inner commentary grows quiet. Not because you've found peace, but because you've learned that reacting only creates more work. The monastery does not break people with cruelty, it breaks them with repetition. Every day looks almost exactly like the one before it. There are no surprises here, no small joys to break the rhythm, no personal milestones, no celebrations that belong to you. Feast days exist, yes, holy days marked on the calendar, but even those are tightly controlled. The joy is prescribed, the gratitude scheduled, the indulgence measured. Nothing here is spontaneous. Spontaneity is disorder. Disorder is sin. You start to realize that time itself behaves differently inside these walls. Without variety, hours stretch and compress in strange ways. A single prayer can feel endless, while entire weeks vanish without leaving a memory behind. Days stop feeling distinct. You couldn't tell one from another if you tried. And slowly, subtly, something inside you starts to recede. Your sense of self, the part of you that reacts, that prefers, that resists, begins to feel like an inconvenience, a noisy thing that doesn't fit the environment, a liability. So you push it down. You tell yourself this is humility. You tell yourself this is discipline. You tell yourself this is holy. But deep down, in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts, moments that grow rarer by the day, a different realization begins to form. This place doesn't want you to grow. It wants you to disappear, not physically, but internally. It wants the sharp edges worn smooth, the questions dulled, the desires starved out. until what remains is someone who obeys without hesitation, suffers without complaint, and no longer expects life to offer anything beyond the next bell. And that's when the illusion finally cracks. You didn't come here to escape the world. You came here to be dismantled. The realization doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in quietly, like the cold seeping through stone walls at night. Subtle at first, easy to dismiss. You tell yourself you're just tired, that the adjustment period is harder than you expected, that everyone feels this way in the beginning. But the feeling doesn't fade. It deepens. You begin to understand that this place was never meant to meet you halfway. There is no negotiation here, no space carved out for your doubts, your memories, or your former life. Those things are not nurtured. They are slowly starved. The monastery offers certainty in exchange for surrender. Every hour is decided, every movement accounted for, every rule justified by centuries of tradition. And tradition here is untouchable. If you struggle, the answer is not that the system is too harsh. The answer is that you are not yet humble enough. If you suffer, it is not a failure of the structure. It is evidence that the structure is working. Pain is reframed as progress. Silence becomes virtue. Exhaustion is sanctified. You are taught not to ask why. Why invites doubt. Doubt invites pride. Pride is the root of all ruin. So you stop asking. You learn to accept. You learn to endure. You learn to comply. And in doing so, you begin to vanish not in a dramatic, tragic way, but in the quiet erosion of who you were before you arrived. Your old ambitions feel distant now, almost embarrassing. Your preferences lose their urgency. Even your memories start to soften at the edges, as if they belong to someone else. The monastery doesn't take these things from you outright. It waits until you give them up willingly. That's the brilliance of it. By the time you realize how much you've lost, you've already learned not to care. You stand in the chapel again, surrounded by bodies dressed just like yours, chanting the same words you've chanted countless times before. Your voice blends in, your posture matches, your thoughts drift less now, and in that moment, something becomes painfully clear. This place is not designed to make you happy. It is not designed to make you fulfilled. It is not designed to make you whole. It is designed to make you obedient. You didn't come here to rest. You didn't come here to recover. You came here to be broken into obedience. And the bell is about to ring. The bell doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't wait for the body to finish whatever fragile, shallow rest it managed to scrape together. It doesn't soften its tone out of mercy or delay itself out of kindness. It rings because it must ring, because the rule says it rings now, and the rule does not bend. The sound cuts through the darkness like a blade. Not a gentle chime, not a reminder. This is a command. Low, heavy, echoing through stone corridors that were designed to carry sound efficiently, relentlessly, into every corner where sleep might try to hide. Your eyes open, but your mind lags behind. For a moment, you don't know where you are. There's no window to orient you. No light except a faint, dying glow from a lamp someone forgot to fully extinguish. The ceiling above you is just darkness and timber beams. The air is cold, sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose when you inhale. Then the bell rings again, and memory snaps into place. You are here. It is still night. Not early morning, not dawn. Night in its purest form. The hour when the world outside is silent, when farmers sleep, when animals huddle, when even thieves think twice before moving. Inside the monastery, this is not rest time. This is prayer time. You push yourself upright, and the straw mattress crackles beneath you. It shifts, uneven and thin, offering no real support. Your back aches immediately, as if your body never truly relaxed in the first place. Maybe it didn't. Sleep here is never deep. It's always on loan. Around you, other figures are already moving. No one speaks. They don't need to. Everyone knows what the bell means. There is no lingering, no sitting in bed to gather yourself, no moment to rub your eyes or stretch without purpose. Those things look like hesitation, and hesitation suggests resistance. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and feel the stone floor beneath your feet. Cold, unforgiving. It seeps upward instantly, creeping through skin and bone alike. You bite back a sharp inhale. Drawing attention to discomfort serves no one here, least of all you. The habit goes on automatically. Rough wool against sleep-warmed skin. It never feels better. You stop expecting it to. You join the slow, silent movement toward the chapel. A line forms without being called. Bodies aligned by instinct, shaped by repetition rather than instruction. The corridor is dim, lit only by a few flickering torches that throw long shadows across the walls. Faces look hollow in this light, cheeks sunken, eyes downcast. Low, slow, no one meets your gaze. Eye contact invites connection. Connection invites distraction. Distraction invites correction. The chapel doors are already open. Inside, the air is even colder. Stone absorbs the night and gives nothing back. The walls feel ancient, damp with centuries of breath and candle smoke. Wax drips harden on iron holders. The scent is familiar now, old stone, melted tallow, human presence held in check. You take your place, standing, always standing at first. Your legs protest immediately. Muscles that never fully recovered from yesterday's labor tighten, stiff, and sore. Your feet ache against the stone floor, but you adjust your weight carefully. Too much shifting looks restless. Restlessness is noted. The chanting begins. Measured. Latin words roll out of mouths half asleep, shaped by memory rather than meaning. The sound fills the chapel, rises toward the ceiling, and settles back down again like a tide that never quite reaches shore. This is Matins, the longest prayer of the day, the prayer that belongs to the night. You don't check how long it lasts. There's no point. It will take as long as it takes. Time here does not move for you. Your body is irrelevant. The rule has spoken. At first, you try to count. You tell yourself you'll keep track of the psalms, that you'll follow along closely, mark progress in your head the way you might count steps on a long road. Surely this has a shape, a beginning, a middle, an end. But Matins is not meant to be navigated. It is meant to be endured. The chants continue, rising and falling with mechanical precision. One voice begins a line. The rest respond, call and answer, over and over. Your mouth moves automatically now, shaping words you barely hear yourself speak. The sound blends into the larger mass of voices until it no longer feels like it belongs to you. Your legs begin to shake. It's subtle at first. A faint tremor in the calves, a tightening behind the knees. You shift your weight ever so slightly, trying to distribute the strain without drawing attention. Everyone else is doing the same thing, each person engaged in their own private battle against gravity and fatigue. No one acknowledges it. Acknowledgement would be weakness. You kneel. The stone is colder here, harder. The pressure bites into your knees immediately, sharp enough to pull your focus away from the chant. You place your hands carefully, fingers together, posture aligned with the bodies around you. Even kneeling has rules. Even pain has form. The prayer does not pause. Your breath begins to fog faintly in front of your face. The chapel is still dark, but you can feel time passing in the slow burn of muscle fatigue. Your shoulders ache from holding themselves in the same position for too long. Your neck stiffens. Your jaw tightens as you recite syllables that no longer feel like language. This is not meditation. Meditation allows the mind to wander, to settle, to observe. This is discipline. Your thoughts try to escape anyway. They drift toward warmth, toward rest, toward the vague memory of mornings that began with light instead of commands. You imagine beds that don't punish you for lying in them. Meals eaten when hunger arrives, not when permission is granted. The moment you notice these thoughts, guilt follows, sharp, immediate. You lower your eyes further. You focus harder on the sound of the chant, as if volume alone can drown out desire. Wanting comfort is indulgence. Wanting rest is weakness. Wanting anything other than what is required of you is a failure of humility. You correct yourself silently again and again. The bell does not ring to mark progress. There are no cues to tell you how much remains. The night stretches on, unbroken, and Matins moves through it with the patience of something that knows it will outlast you. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs. It is quickly stifled. An arm raises to cover a mouth. The sound disappears as if it never existed. Even illness must be discreet. You glance up briefly, a mistake, and catch sight of the altar. Bare, simple, unadorned. This is not a place meant to inspire awe through beauty. It inspires submission through restraint. Everything unnecessary has been stripped away, including you. When the prayer finally ends, it does not end triumphantly. There is no release of tension, no collective exhale, no sense of accomplishment. The final words fall into silence, and the silence remains. Heavy, expectant, you stay exactly where you are, waiting for instruction that does not need to be spoken. Because Matins is not the end, it is only the beginning. There is no instruction to relax, no signal that you are allowed to soften your posture or shift your weight freely. The prayer has ended, but the discipline has not. You remain still because stillness has become instinctive. Movement now feels like disobedience, even when no one has said a word. This is how control settles in, through force, through habit. Eventually, you rise. Slowly, carefully, joints stiff from cold and strain protest as you straighten your legs. A dull ache pulses through your lower back, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but lingers, promising to return again and again throughout the day. You don't stretch. Stretching is indulgent. Instead, you fold yourself back into line as the community files out of the chapel. The corridor feels narrower now, or maybe that's just exhaustion compressing your perception. The torches flicker lower. Shadows sway along the walls like tired companions who never quite leave you alone. Outside, the sky is still black. No hint of dawn. No softening at the edges. Your body is screaming for rest, but rest is not on the schedule. Between matins and lauds, there is a pause not long enough to sleep, not meant for comfort, just enough time to stand, to wait, to exist in a holding pattern where thought becomes effort. You lean against the cold wall, careful not to look like you're leaning. Posture matters even now. Your eyelids feel heavy, grainy, as if sand has been rubbed into them. Each blink threatens to turn into something longer. You fight it. Everyone does. No one says anything about it, but everyone knows the quiet shame of almost nodding off during a holy vigil. Sleep here is not a human need. It is a temptation. The rule expects you to conquer it. As you wait, you become aware of your body in fragments. Feet numb against stone. Fingers stiff inside your sleeves. A persistent chill creeping up your legs. Hunger gnaws faintly. Not sharp enough to hurt yet, but present. Always present. This is intentional. Hunger keeps you alert. Fatigue keeps you humble. Together, they make resistance difficult. Your mind begins to flatten again. Thoughts slow. Emotions dull. The sharpness you brought with you into the monastery, curiosity, anxiety, anticipation, fades into something quieter, heavier. A low-level awareness that your only task is to endure the next instruction. This is what the hours before dawn are for. They strip away illusion. When the bell rings again, calling you back for lauds, the prayer that greets the coming light, it doesn't startle you this time. You're already halfway surrendered. Your body moves before your mind fully registers the sound. Back into the chapel, back onto the stone. The chant begins again, lighter in tone, praising the approaching day, but your body does not feel renewed. There is no sense of fresh beginning here, just continuation. You kneel, you stand, you chant, and as the sky outside finally begins to pale, you realize something unsettling. Most people greet the morning with hope. Here, the morning only means more hours. By the time Lauds ends, the sky outside has begun to change. Not in any dramatic way. There is no sunrise spilling gold across the cloister, no warmth sneaking in through stained glass. Just a gradual thinning of the darkness, a dull gray light pressing itself against the narrow windows, like a question it already knows the answer to. Morning has arrived. Your body doesn't respond to this news. If anything, it feels heavier now, as though the effort of surviving the night prayers has drained whatever small reserve of strength you had left. Your legs are stiff, your shoulders tight, your head faintly buzzing with that hollow sensation that comes from too little sleep stretched across too much effort. You feel wrung out, and the day hasn't started yet. You file out of the chapel once more, movements slower now, more deliberate. Everyone looks the same in this light pale faces, lowered eyes, habits hanging loose on bodies already beginning to thin under the combined pressure of fasting and labor. No one congratulates you for enduring the night. Endurance is not praised here, it is assumed. You might expect a break now, a return to the dormitory, a chance to sit, to rest, to close your eyes even briefly. That would make sense in a world designed for human limits. This is not that world. Instead, you move directly into the next appointed task. Perhaps a short period of reading, perhaps preparation for labor, perhaps another silent interval meant for reflection defined very narrowly, carefully, to prevent it from drifting into anything personal. Your stomach tightens. Breakfast will come later, much later. Hunger is not something you address immediately here. It is something you carry with you, like a reminder of your place, a quiet companion that sharpens obedience and dulls distraction. As the monastery begins to stir into its daytime rhythm, you realize that what you experienced during the night was not an exception. It was an introduction. This is how the monastery speaks to the body, not with violence, not with cruelty, but with indifference. Your exhaustion is not a problem to be solved. Your discomfort is not a flaw in the system. Your limits are not respected. They are tested. Again. And again. And again. Sleep deprivation here is not accidental. It is structured, calculated, repeated until your sense of time blurs and your resistance softens. A tired mind asks fewer questions. A tired body obeys faster. And slowly, without ceremony, you begin to internalize this logic. If you are struggling, you assume the fault is yours. If you are failing, you assume you need more discipline. If you are breaking, you assume this is what growth feels like. That belief is essential, because once you accept that suffering is instruction, the monastery no longer has to force anything. You will do the work yourself. As the bell fades and the gray morning settles in, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Your body does not set the rules here. The rule does, and it will speak again soon. By the time the monastery fully wakes, you've already worked harder than most people outside these walls will all day. Not with tools, not with muscle, but with your attention. Prayer here is not a moment. It is an occupation. It doesn't arrive when you need it. It interrupts you when you don't. It cuts across hunger, fatigue, and thought with the same quiet authority every time. The bell doesn't ask whether your mind is ready to focus. It assumes that focus is mandatory. After Lauds, prayer doesn't end. It spreads. It weaves itself into the day in fixed intervals, like knots tied into a rope you're forced to climb hand over hand. Prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, each one waiting for you, patient and inevitable. You learn the schedule quickly, not because it's explained, but because missing it would be unthinkable. Missing prayer is not like missing a meal or a task. It is a moral failure, and moral failures here don't stay private. The chapel becomes your second home, though home implies comfort, familiarity, welcome. None of those apply. You enter it again and again, always from the same angle, always to the same spot, always to repeat the same actions. Stand, kneel, bow, chant. The stone floor knows the shape of your knees now. Small depressions worn smooth by centuries of bodies doing exactly what you're doing, in exactly the same place. This is not metaphorical. The building remembers. Your body will too. The chants resume, steady and unyielding. Psalms recited so often they've lost any sense of narrative. Praise without context. Supplication without specificity. Words that float free of meaning and exist only as sound and obligation. You try, at first, to pray sincerely. You listen for the words that are supposed to move you. You focus on the ones about mercy, about light, about rest. You tell yourself that if you can just connect emotionally, the effort will feel worthwhile. But sincerity is exhausting, and the monastery demands endurance, not feeling. Soon, you stop chasing meaning. You let the words pass through you, shaped by your mouth, and released into the air without settling anywhere inside. This is not discouraged. In fact, it's ideal. A monk who questions every line is distracted. A monk who recites without thought is efficient. Efficiency is holiness here. The physical toll accumulates quietly. Hours of standing pull at your calves and lower back. Kneeling compresses joints that never quite recover between sessions. Bowing over and over sends a dull ache through your spine, a reminder that this is not symbolic humility. It is embodied. Pain is not a side effect. It is part of the design. When discomfort rises, you are expected to redirect it, not to relieve it, not to address it, but to reinterpret it. Pain is framed as purification. Fatigue becomes proof of devotion. The more it hurts, the more you are told it matters. You begin to understand that prayer here is not meant to elevate you. It is meant to wear you down. And as the hours stack up, one after another, with prayer cutting cleanly through every other activity, a strange shift begins to take place. Your sense of self starts to thin. You are no longer someone who prays. You are someone who is praying continuously. As the day unfolds, prayer begins to lose its edges. At first, it had shape, an opening, a closing, a sense, however faint, that something was being addressed, even if no answer ever came back. Now, it seeps into everything. It interrupts labor. It slices meals in half. It pulls you out of whatever fragile rhythm you've found and resets it without apology. The bell rings. Always the bell. You could be mid-sentence in your own head, chasing a thought you're not supposed to be having. You could be lifting something heavy, your muscles already trembling from strain. You could be copying a line of text, quill hovering just above the parchment, ink about to commit itself to the page. None of that matters. The bell rings, and the world stops. Tools are set down exactly where they are. Hands are wiped quickly, imperfectly. Bodies turn in unison, already moving before permission is consciously granted. There is no resentment allowed here, no visible frustration. Even irritation must be swallowed before it reaches the face. Because prayer is not an interruption, prayer is the priority. You return to the chapel again, and again, and again. The movements become automatic. You could do them in your sleep, which is unfortunate, because sleep is the one thing you are not allowed to have enough of. Your mouth forms the words without conscious effort now. Your voice slides into the familiar register, matching pitch and pace with the others. There is comfort in sameness, but it is a comfort that costs something. Attention. You begin to notice gaps in your awareness. Moments where you are chanting, kneeling, bowing, and yet you cannot recall a single word you've said in the last several minutes. Your body performed the task while your mind drifted somewhere else entirely. This should alarm you. Instead, it feels like relief. Thinking is work here. Feeling is risky. Letting the ritual carry you is easier, safer, less demanding. You learn to float inside the structure, to let repetition dull the edges of consciousness until effort itself becomes optional. This is not failure. This is adaptation. The monastery does not correct you for this. No one pulls you aside to demand deeper sincerity. No one asks whether you felt inspired, uplifted, transformed. Those are modern expectations. Medieval monasticism has no use for them. What matters is that you were present, physically, audibly, on time. God, in this context, is not a listener. God is an audience you perform for until performance becomes instinct. Your knees hurt more now. The skin is tender, bruised beneath layers of fabric. Standing sends little flashes of pain through your feet as circulation struggles to return. Your shoulders ache from holding themselves square and still. Your throat grows dry from hours of chanting in cold air. You notice that you have stopped reacting to this. Pain no longer sparks irritation or fear. It has become background noise, a low hum beneath everything else. Something you carry without comment, because commenting would require energy you no longer have. And in this dulling, something subtle shifts. Prayer stops being something you do. It becomes something that happens to you. There comes a point when you stop anticipating prayer. You don't brace for it anymore. You don't mentally prepare. You don't even check the light in the sky or the ache in your body to guess how close the next bell might be. You simply assume it is always imminent. This changes the way your mind works. Outside the monastery, people divide their day into tasks, conversations, meals, pauses. Inside these walls, prayer fractures time into smaller and smaller pieces, until nothing feels continuous. Everything is provisional. Everything can be interrupted. You stop planning beyond the next bell. Long thoughts feel dangerous now. They stretch too far forward. They require imagination, memory, comparison. All of those invite desire, and desire invites dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction leads to questioning. Questioning leads nowhere good. So your mind adapts, it shortens itself. You think in fragments now. Instructions, motions, single lines of chant, a single breath at a time. This is not accidental. It is cultivated. A mind that cannot hold complexity is easier to guide. And prayer is the tool that keeps it that way. By sext, the midday prayer, the body begins to sag. The initial stiffness of the morning has given way to a deeper fatigue, one that settles into joints and refuses to move on. Standing feels heavier now, as if gravity itself has intensified since dawn. The chapel is brighter at this hour. Sunlight filters weakly through high windows, illuminating dust motes that drift lazily in the air. They move freely, unconcerned with bells or rules or posture. You notice them, and for a moment, your mind lingers there. That's all it takes. A hand shifts slightly, a breath deepens. You become aware of yourself noticing something that is not the prayer, and immediately you correct. Eyes down, focus forward, voice steady. Attention is policed from the inside now. No one needs to watch you closely. You have learned to watch yourself, to monitor every wandering thought, to tighten your inner reins the moment they slacken. This constant vigilance is exhausting, but exhaustion has become normal. The chants continue, and you realize you no longer know which psalm you are on. You recognize the sounds, the rhythm, but not the sequence. It doesn't matter. Knowing is optional. Participating is mandatory. You feel strangely distant from your own voice. It rises and falls with the others, indistinguishable, interchangeable. If you stop speaking for a moment, someone else's voice would fill the space seamlessly. That thought should frighten you. Instead, it comforts you. Being replaceable means you don't have to carry anything alone. This is another lesson prayer teaches quietly. You are not unique, and you are not required to be. The pain returns in waves. Knees throb, feet burn, your lower back tightens, then loosens, then tightens again. You breathe through it without thinking. Pain is no longer something to solve. It is something to absorb. You begin to understand what the older monks mean when they speak of discipline as freedom. Freedom from preference, freedom from desire, freedom from the burden of self. Prayer, repeated enough times, grinds those things down, and in the space they leave behind, something quieter takes root. Not joy, not peace, acceptance. By the time the final prayers of the afternoon approach, something fundamental has shifted. Not in the monastery, in you. Prayer no longer feels like an action you initiate. It feels like an environment you exist inside. Like weather, like gravity. It surrounds you, presses on you, shapes your posture and your thoughts without asking permission. You respond to the bell before you fully hear it. Your body has learned the sound the way animals learn danger. Muscles move automatically. Tools are set down mid-motion. Conversations, if any were ever happening, die instantly. You're already walking before you consciously decide to. This is what repetition does when it's given enough time. It bypasses intention. By now, your mind rarely protests. It doesn't argue about fairness or necessity. Those questions belong to a version of you that feels distant, almost fictional. Instead, your thoughts have narrowed to something more manageable. Where do I stand? When do I kneel? When do I speak? When do I stop? Prayer has trained you to live inside instructions, and the strangest part is that it works. Not because it enlightens you, but because it exhausts you. There is no energy left for rebellion, no fuel for internal debate. The constant physical strain, standing, kneeling, bowing, paired with hunger and lack of sleep, drains your capacity to resist. Even doubt requires stamina. By the time Vespers arrives, as daylight begins to thin again, your body feels hollow. Not empty in a peaceful sense, but scraped clean. Muscles respond slowly. Movements lag by a fraction of a second. Your voice sounds distant in your own ears, as if it's coming from someone else's mouth. You no longer try to mean the words. Meaning is a luxury. You let the rhythm carry you. Let the familiar sounds wash over you without sticking. This is not discouraged. Older monks do the same. Their faces are calm, unreadable, shaped by decades of this exact pattern. This is the end state the monastery aims for. Not passion, not ecstasy, not revelation. Reliability. A person who shows up. A body that moves on command. A voice that joins the chant without hesitation. Prayer in this system is not about communion with God. It is about alignment. Aligning your body with the schedule, aligning your mind with obedience, aligning your will until it no longer pulls in any direction of its own. And when compline finally closes the day, when the last words are spoken and silence descends fully once more, there is no sense of completion, no satisfaction, just a quiet, bone-deep weariness. You have prayed for hours. You feel no closer to understanding anything, but you feel smaller, more manageable. And that, here, success. Silence in the monastery is not accidental. It is not the absence of sound that happens naturally when people have nothing to say. It is constructed, enforced, maintained with the same care as prayer schedules and fasting calendars. This is the great silence, and it begins long before nightfall. At first, you think silence will be a relief. After hours of chanting, after the strain of holding your body in rigid shapes, The idea of not having to speak feels merciful. No more words to remember, no more syllables to shape correctly, no more effort to keep your voice steady when your throat is dry. But this silence is not rest. It is surveillance without watchers. You are not simply discouraged from speaking, you are trained out of it. Conversation is permitted only when absolutely necessary, and even then, it is stripped down to function. No opinions, no stories, no commentary. Language reduced to instructions and acknowledgments. Yes, no, understand. Anything beyond that risks correction. You learn quickly that even harmless speech is dangerous here. A joke suggests levity. Levity suggests attachment to the world. Attachment suggests weakness. Weakness invites scrutiny. So you stop. Not all at once. Not dramatically. You simply don't speak. And the longer you remain silent, the harder it becomes to remember how conversation is supposed to work. Silence presses inward. Without speech, thoughts grow louder, at least at first. Memories resurface unexpectedly. Fragments of old conversations, arguments you never finished, people whose voices you haven't heard in weeks, months, maybe years. This is why silence is enforced, because before it breaks you, it exposes you. The monastery does not want you revisiting your former life. It does not want you comparing this existence to the one you left behind. It wants your inner world to shrink to match your outer one. Stone walls, scheduled hours, prescribed thoughts. So when memories rise, you are expected to smother them with prayer. When emotions surface, you redirect them inward, then downward, until they lose their shape. You do not talk them out. You do not share. You endure. Walking through the cloister in silence feels different than you expect. Footsteps echo softly, rhythmic and controlled. The sound of fabric brushing against itself becomes noticeable. Breathing becomes audible. You become intensely aware of your own presence and immediately uncomfortable with it. Existing too loudly feels wrong here. Even eye contact is limited. Looking too long suggests curiosity. Curiosity suggests interest. Interest suggests desire. Desire suggests attachment. So eyes stay lowered. Faces become unreadable. Everyone becomes a moving shape in the same habit, gliding past one another like ghosts who have agreed not to acknowledge their shared haunting. You pass the same people every day. You do not know that, not really. You don't know who misses their family, who doubts, who is angry, who is afraid. Silence keeps all of that buried. And slowly, subtly, it begins to work on you. After a while, silence stops feeling like something imposed from the outside. It starts to grow inward. At first, your thoughts are loud. They chatter the way voices do when they've been held back too long. You replay moments from your life before the monastery faces, places, half-remembered conversations. Your mind fills the empty space speech once occupied. This is the most dangerous phase, because this is when you are still fully yourself. You still remember what it feels like to react out loud, to laugh, to complain, to test an idea by saying it and seeing how it lands. Without that release, thoughts begin to loop. They circle the same memories, the same questions, the same doubts. Why did I come here? What am I proving? How long can I do this? You don't voice these questions. You can't. So they stay inside, echoing softly, growing heavier with each repetition. The monastery has an answer for this. Not reassurance, not conversation, more silence. You're taught to interrupt your own thoughts the same way the bell interrupts your labor. The moment your mind starts to wander into personal territory, you redirect it. A prayer, a verse, a memorized line of scripture, anything repetitive will do. The goal is not insight. The goal is interruption. Over time, you get better at it. Faster. The thought barely forms before it's cut off. You stop letting your mind complete sentences. You stop following ideas to their conclusions. You become skilled at mental self-censorship. This is praised as discipline. What it really is erosion. Without conversation, your sense of perspective shrinks. There is no one to reflect your thoughts back to you, no one to challenge them, no one to confirm that what you're feeling is reasonable, or shared, or even real. You begin to doubt your own reactions. Are you tired, or weak? Are you struggling, or sinful? Are you lonely, or just insufficiently devoted? Silence offers no answers, only more room for self-blame. Walking in silence alongside others becomes strangely intimate and utterly isolating at the same time. You are surrounded by bodies, close enough to hear breathing, close enough to feel heat in winter and chill in summer, yet utterly cut off. No reassurance passes between you. No shared glance that says, "This is hard." No whispered solidarity. Everyone is alone together. You notice how often you want to speak, not to say anything important, just to acknowledge existence, to comment on the weather, to react to something small and human. Those impulses are suppressed immediately. They feel childish now, indulgent. You begin to associate speech with danger, with correction, with failure, and slowly, without anyone explicitly telling you to, you begin to identify silence with safety. Eventually, silence stops feeling like restraint. It starts to feel like identity. You notice it first in small and settling ways. When a rare opportunity for speech appears, a necessary instruction, a brief exchange permitted by the rule, your voice feels unfamiliar in your own throat. Too loud, too exposed, as if sound itself is an intrusion. You speak quickly, efficiently, then stop. Relief follows. The quiet closes back in, sealing the moment away. That's when you realize something has changed. You no longer want to talk. Not because you have nothing to say, but because speaking now feels like effort, like risk, like standing out under a light you've learned to avoid. Silence has become the safer option, the default state, the place where nothing can be misinterpreted or used against you. This is how isolation works when it's done slowly, not by cutting you off from people entirely, but by convincing you that connection is unnecessary, even undesirable. You walk the cloister paths in perfect stillness, eyes lowered, hands folded. The rhythm of your steps matches those around you, a quiet procession that never breaks formation. From the outside, it looks serene, orderly, purposeful. From the inside, it feels hollow. Your internal world has grown smaller. Thoughts are simpler now, less exploratory, less argumentative. You don't chase ideas anymore. You acknowledge them briefly, then let them dissolve before they can grow teeth. You have learned which thoughts lead to discomfort. You avoid them. Memories of laughter feel strange now, almost embarrassing. You remember once filling silence instinctively, talking just to be heard, just to feel the shape of words in your mouth. That version of you feels distant and disciplined, noisy. You don't miss conversation, you miss proof that you exist. Without speech, without reaction, without expression, days blur together. You can't measure time by events or exchanges. There are no stories to tell yourself about what happened today. Only tasks completed, prayers endured, silence maintained. The self thrives on reflection. Silence starves it, and the longer you remain in this environment, the harder it becomes to imagine returning to a world where people speak freely, where opinions spill out unchecked, where emotions are expressed instead of contained. That world begins to feel dangerous, chaotic, sinful. Silence, once imposed, now feels virtuous. You start to judge noise harshly, even your own. A cough feels intrusive. A footstep out of rhythm feels disruptive. You flinch internally at sound, as if volume itself is a moral failing. This is the monastery's quiet triumph. You are no longer being silenced, you are silencing yourself. By the time night approaches, silence has fully settled into your bones. It no longer feels like something you endure. It feels like something you inhabit. The monastery grows quieter as evening prayers end, and the great silence officially begins. No more permitted speech until morning. Not even functional words now. Not even necessary ones. From this point on, language itself is treated as a threat. You move through the corridors knowing that anything you say, even a whisper, even a reflexive sound would mark you, not as malicious, not as rebellious, just unformed, undisciplined, not yet hollow enough. And that is worse, so you say nothing, you hear everything. The soft scuff of feet on stone, the rustle of fabric as bodies turn in sleep, the occasional cough, quickly smothered, the building itself settling, wood shifting, stone breathing, without conversation to filter experience. Every sound becomes louder in your mind, every sensation sharper. The cold feels colder, the ache in your joints more present. Hunger gnaws more insistently now that there's nothing to distract you from it. You lie on your straw mattress, staring into darkness, and realize that silence has taken the place of companionship. There is no one to tell you that today was hard, no one to agree, no one to contradict. Your experiences remain unconfirmed, and unconfirmed experiences begin to feel unreal. This is the deepest cut silence makes. It does not merely isolate you from others, it isolates you from yourself. You no longer narrate your life internally the way you once did. There is no audience, not even an imagined one. Without words, experiences pass through you without leaving much of a trace. You begin to forget how you felt about things, and then, gradually, you forget that you ever felt strongly at all. This is why silence works so well here. It removes friction, it removes contrast, it removes the sense that something could be different. By the time sleep finally claims you shallow, fragmented, and brief, you are quieter inside than you've ever been. Not peaceful, not calm, just muted. And when the bell rings again in the dark, tearing you back into awareness, you will rise without speaking, without protest, without even the impulse to complain. Because silence has already done its work. You are still here, but the part of you that needed to be heard is fading. Morning in the monastery does not arrive with warmth. It arrives with permission. Permission to stop praying. Permission to stop standing. Permission to move toward food. Not because your body needs it, that's irrelevant, but because the rule allows it now. You file into the refectory in silence. The room is long and narrow, built of the same cold stone as the rest of the monastery, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Narrow windows high on the walls let in just enough light to illuminate the tables without offering any sense of the outside world. You cannot see fields, or sky, or weather. Only stone, wood, and bodies arranged with purpose. Long wooden tables stretch from one end of the room to the other. They are scarred. Not dramatically, no gouges or carvings, but worn smooth by centuries of repetition. Bowls placed, hands folded, elbows avoided. The same movements, over and over again, long after the people who first performed them turned to dust beneath the floor. There are no personal places. You sit where you are directed. You will sit there every day unless told otherwise. You do not choose your seat. Choice would imply preference, and preference is the first step toward desire. You lower yourself onto the bench carefully. Sitting itself feels strange after hours of standing and kneeling. Your muscles resist relaxation, unsure whether they are allowed to release tension yet. Your back aches when it straightens. Your knees throb faintly as circulation returns. You keep your posture upright. Slouching suggests comfort. Comfort suggests indulgence. In front of you sits a wooden bowl. It is shallow, unadorned, functional. Inside it is porridge, thin, gray, barely steaming, made from whatever grain was cheapest this season. Oats, barley, sometimes a mixture that tastes like neither. It smells faintly of boiled water and very little else. Beside it lies a chunk of bread, dense, dark, heavy in the hand. It is not fresh. Fresh bread is for feast days, and feast days are rare. This bread is designed to fill space in your stomach, not to please you. There is no butter, no honey, no fruit. There is weak ale or watered milk, depending on the house and the season. Just enough liquid to swallow the bread without choking. You do not reach for any of it yet. No one does, because breakfast does not begin with eating. It begins with listening. At the far end of the refectory, a lector stands, usually a younger monk, sometimes a nun. In women's houses, their voice is steady, practiced, emotionless. They open a book, scripture, or a saint's life, or a moral treatise, and begin to read aloud. You lower your eyes. The reading begins. The words echo softly off the stone walls, filling the space that conversation is not allowed to occupy. You are meant to listen while you eat, to nourish the soul while feeding the body. That is the official explanation. The reality is simpler. Silence is never truly allowed to belong to you. Even while eating, your mind must be occupied. You are permitted to begin. You lift the spoon. It is wooden, worn smooth by use. It fits your hand well enough, though your fingers feel stiff and clumsy from cold and fatigue. You dip it into the porridge and bring it to your mouth. The taste is exactly what you expect. Almost nothing. Warmth, texture, faint grain, no salt, no sweetness. Your body reacts anyway. Your stomach tightens with relief at the arrival of food. Hunger sharpens your senses, making the porridge feel more substantial than it truly is. You chew the bread slowly, carefully, aware that this is all you will receive for now. You do not rush. Eating too quickly suggests greed. Greed is sin. For monks, breakfast is sparse by design. Many monastic rules limit meals severely, especially outside feast days. Meat is forbidden most of the year. Even fish is rare unless the house is wealthy or near water. Hunger is considered useful. It keeps the body subdued. For nuns, the expectations are the same and harsher. Women's houses are often poorer. Their meals are smaller. Their portions watched more closely. A nun who eats eagerly risks being judged as lacking restraint. A monk may be ascetic. A nun must be invisible. You chew carefully, you swallow, you listen. The lector's voice continues, steady and impersonal, recounting moral lessons about humility, obedience, restraint. Stories of saints who starved themselves willingly, who ate less than this, who thrived on less than you are receiving now. The message is clear. If you are hungry, you are still being indulged. If your stomach aches afterward, that is your failure, not the system's. You glance down at your bowl just briefly and immediately correct yourself. Looking at food too much is discouraged. You are not meant to dwell on it. Food is fuel, not focus. For monks, the refectory reinforces brotherhood without intimacy. You sit shoulder to shoulder with men you pray beside daily, yet you do not speak. You do not exchange glances. You do not acknowledge shared hunger or fatigue. For nuns, the silence cuts differently. Women are expected to be models of restraint. Their bodies seen as inherently more dangerous, more in need of discipline. A nun's hunger is not just physical, it is moral. To desire food too openly is to desire too much. So you keep your movements minimal. You eat slowly, mechanically, timing each bite to the cadence of the reading. Spoon, chew, swallow, pause. You are aware of every sensation. The scrape of wood on wood, the faint steam rising from the bowl, the hollow feeling that tells you this meal will not last. When the lector finishes a passage, there is no commentary, no discussion, no reflection. They simply turn the page and continue. and you continue eating. Because here, even nourishment is a lesson. As the meal continues, you become aware of how closely eating is watched, not openly, not with guards or glares, but with expectation. You feel it in the stillness of the room, in the careful choreography of bodies moving in near unison. Spoons rise and fall at similar speeds. Bites are small. Chewing is quiet. No one reaches for more than what has been placed in front of them. No one finishes too quickly. No one lingers too long. This is not coincidence. This is training. In the monastery, hunger is not a problem to be solved. It is a tool, a gentle, persistent pressure that keeps you aware of your body's weakness and your dependence on the rule. To eat too eagerly is to admit that the body has demands. To eat too slowly is to draw attention. Either way, you are noticed. So you aim for invisibility. You measure each movement against the people beside you. You adjust your pace subtly, aligning yourself with the collective rhythm. Eating becomes another form of prayer, repetitive, controlled, stripped of pleasure. For monks, this discipline is framed as strength. A monk eats little is admired. His hunger is evidence of fortitude. His restraint is read as spiritual focus. He is seen as mastering the body, bending appetite to will. Stories circulate quietly, never celebrated loudly, but known of brothers who fast beyond what is required, who take smaller portions without being told, who grow thinner year by year, and are praised for it in the language of sanctity. But even here, there are limits. A monk who grows too weak to work becomes a burden. His suffering must still be productive. Hunger is valued only as long as it does not interfere with labor or prayer. The body may be punished, but it must remain functional. For nuns, the rules are the same on paper. In practice, they are sharper. Women's bodies are watched more closely, interpreted more harshly. A nun's appetite is not just physical, it is symbolic. Hunger in a woman is associated with desire, and desire is dangerous. A nun who eats eagerly risks being seen as indulgent. A nun who eats too little risks being accused of pride. There is no safe middle ground, so you become cautious. You take care not to appear hungry, even when your stomach tightens painfully. You do not scrape the bowl. You leave a trace behind, however small, to signal moderation. You learn to swallow hunger along with the food, to present an image of calm detachment. This is not discussed openly. It doesn't need to be. The lesson is absorbed through observation and correction. A glance held too long on another's bowl. A whispered admonition later. A reminder during confession that attachment can take many forms. Even nourishment becomes a moral test. As the lector's voice continues, your attention drifts despite yourself. Hunger makes thoughts sharper, more insistent. You find yourself imagining food you haven't tasted in years. Fruit, cheese, warm bread with crust that cracks when you tear it. You shut the thought down immediately. Wanting is dangerous. You focus instead on the words being read, a passage about humility, perhaps, or a saint who lived on bread and water alone for decades. The implication is clear. What you are receiving now is generous. Gratitude is expected. Your bowl empties sooner than you would like. You slow down instinctively, stretching the last few bites, but the end arrives regardless. There is no second helping. There never is. You wipe the spoon clean against the side of the bowl and place it carefully on the table. Hands fold, eyes lower. The meal is not over until permission is given. The lector finishes the final lines. The room remains silent for a moment longer, as if the words must settle before action is allowed. Then, without announcement, the community rises. Benches scrape softly against stone. The bowls are collected. And just like that, the only meal you will have had since the previous day is finished. Your stomach does not feel full. It feels quieted. Hunger recedes slightly, dulled, but not erased. It will return later, sharper, more distracting. That is expected. That is intended. As you file out of the refectory, you realize that breakfast has not strengthened you. It has reminded you of your limits, and that reminder will follow you through the rest of the day. The hunger does not leave with the refectory. It follows you, quietly at first, like a distant ache you can ignore if you keep moving, then more insistently, tightening and loosening in slow waves, reminding you that what you ate was never meant to satisfy, only to restrain collapse. In the monastery, hunger is seasonal, not because food suddenly becomes abundant or scarce, but because restraint intensifies according to the calendar. The liturgical year governs appetite as surely as it governs prayer. Lent, Advent, vigils, ember days, long stretches when fasting is not an exception but the norm. During these periods, breakfast becomes thinner still. Sometimes it disappears entirely. For monks, this is framed as spiritual sharpening. The empty stomach is said to make prayer clearer, the mind more focused, the soul lighter. Hunger is described as a veil being lifted from the senses. In reality, it dulls everything. The world narrows. Thoughts shorten. Emotions flatten. You move through the hours with less resistance, because resistance itself requires energy. For nuns, fasting carries an added weight. Their bodies are already seen as sites of danger, too visible, too tempting, too bound to flesh. Fasting becomes not just devotion, but proof. Proof of purity, proof of control, proof that the body has been subdued. A nun who fasts well is praised indirectly. A comment in passing, a nod of approval, a reputation that spreads quietly. A nun who struggles is counseled, corrected, reminded of her vows. No one asks how hunger feels. They ask whether it has been offered properly. As days of restricted eating stack atop one another, hunger becomes constant, not sharp enough to panic, but steady enough to never forget. It changes the way you think. You become slower. Movements take more effort. Decisions feel heavier. Even simple tasks, lifting a bucket, carrying wood, copying a line of text, demand focus. The body begins to conserve energy automatically, and with that conservation comes compliance. Hunger makes obedience easier. You are less inclined to question instructions when standing up makes your head swim slightly. You are less likely to linger on doubts when the act of thinking feels like work. You learn, unconsciously, that submission costs less than resistance. This is why fasting works, not because it purifies the soul, but because it weakens the will. And yet, you are expected to take responsibility for it. Hunger is never framed as imposed. It is framed as chosen. If you struggle, that struggle belongs to you. If you fail, it is your failure. If you fantasize about food, that fantasy becomes a sin to confess. Confession waits patiently for this. When you kneel before the confessor, a monk before the abbot or a designated priest, a nun before her superior or confessor, hunger is no excuse. You are asked about your thoughts. Did you desire food? Did you resent the rule? Did you linger on taste, quantity, comfort? You search your memory carefully. Hunger makes recall fuzzy, but guilt sharpens it. You remember the moment your eyes followed the bowl too long, the moment you imagined more, the fleeting bitterness when the bread ran out. You confess these things quietly, and they are received seriously, because desire is not measured by action here. It is measured by inclination. A monk may be advised to pray more, to fast a little longer, to accept hunger more joyfully. A nun may be reminded of modesty, of vigilance, of the danger of letting the body lead the soul. Neither is comforted. Comfort would undermine the lesson. Over time, you begin to associate hunger with morality. A full stomach feels suspicious. Satisfaction feels indulgent. The absence of hunger feels like a lapse in discipline. You start to trust discomfort more than ease. This is how appetite becomes a mirror. You no longer ask whether you are nourished. You ask whether you are worthy. And because hunger is constant, that question never resolves. You leave confession lighter in theory, heavier in practice. Your stomach remains empty. Your mind remains alert for the next failing. Hunger sharpens self-scrutiny until it becomes automatic. You monitor yourself constantly. How much did I eat? How eagerly? Did I enjoy it? Even pleasure itself becomes suspect, especially pleasure. For nuns, this scrutiny extends outward as well as inward. Their eating is observed not just by authority, but by one another. A glance, a pause, an unspoken comparison. Community becomes another mirror, reflecting judgment without words. For monks, hunger becomes competitive in subtler ways. Who fasts longest? Who endures quietly? Who weakens without complaint? Suffering becomes currency, and you spend it daily. By the time the next meal approaches hours away, sometimes a full day away, hunger is no longer just a sensation. It is structure. It organizes your thoughts, your pace, your obedience. You are learning, bite by bite, absence by absence, that the body is something to be managed, not trusted. And that lesson, once learned, is hard to unlearn. Eventually, hunger stops announcing itself. It no longer arrives as a sharp pang or an urgent ache. It settles into you the way cold settles into stone, gradually, invisibly, until it feels permanent. You wake with it, you pray with it, you work with it, and at some point, you stop imagining what it would feel like to be without it. This is when the monastery knows the lesson has taken root. Food loses its emotional weight first. In the beginning, meals are milestones. You count the hours until them. You imagine them in advance. You notice every bite. Hunger gives food meaning, and meaning gives hunger power. But after weeks, months, years of controlled eating, that relationship erodes. The wooden bowl no longer signals relief. The bread no longer feels scarce. The porridge no longer disappoints. It simply exists. You eat because the rule permits it. You stop because the rule says stop. Your body adapts in ways you don't fully notice. Appetite dulls. The stomach shrinks. Hunger becomes quiet, more manageable, less demanding. You learn to function on less, not because you've grown stronger, but because your expectations have been reduced. This is the monastery's quiet victory. Does not starve you outright. It teaches you not to want. For monks, this flattening of desire is praised as maturity. A monk who no longer reacts to food is seen as having achieved balance. His detachment is interpreted as wisdom. He eats without eagerness, without complaint, without visible preference. He has learned to accept what is given. For nuns, the same detachment carries a different undertone. A nun who shows no interest in food is considered safe. Her body is no longer a problem to be managed. Her appetite no longer threatens discipline. Her restraint becomes proof that she has mastered herself. But the cost is rarely discussed, because the cost is internal. As hunger becomes routine, pleasure fades from eating entirely. Taste dulls. Texture barely registers. Even on feast days, when food is slightly richer, slightly more abundant, the response is muted. You eat more because you were told to, but it does not feel like celebration. Joy requires contrast, and contrast has been erased. This is why feast days often feel strangely empty to those who have lived this way long enough. The extra bread, the bit of fish, the honeyed dish, they arrive in a body that no longer knows how to receive pleasure without suspicion. Enjoyment feels risky. Indulgence feels wrong. So you eat carefully even then, guarding against delight as much as excess. Over time, hunger reshapes your sense of self. You stop trusting your body's signals. Hunger is not a cue to eat. Fatigue is not a cue to rest. Discomfort is not a cue to change course. All of these sensations have been reframed as tests, not information. The body becomes something external, a tool, a burden, an thing to be governed. This is particularly stark for nuns. Women's bodies, already burdened with meaning in medieval thought, become sites of constant vigilance. Appetite, menstruation, illness, all are moralized. A nun learns quickly that ignoring her body is safer than listening to it. To feel too much is dangerous. To want too much is sinful. To need too much is shameful. So you learn not to notice. For monks, the body is disciplined. For nuns, it is erased. And yet, both are diminished by the same mechanism. Hunger becomes background noise. Not loud enough to protest. Not sharp enough to demand attention. Just constant enough to remind you that you do not belong to yourself. This is where modern minds would break. Not at the first missed meal. Not at the thin porridge. But here in the long, quiet stretch where hunger stops hurting and starts shaping. Because modern people expect discomfort to end. We endure pain believing it will resolve. We accept deprivation assuming it leads to relief. The monastery offers neither. There is no finish line where hunger is rewarded. No phase where the discipline eases because you have earned it. There is only continuation. Day after day. Bowl after bowl, less than enough, always, and in that constancy, something fundamental changes. Food no longer anchors your day. It no longer punctuates time. It no longer offers comfort or reward. It becomes just another instruction you follow. Eat now, stop now. Be grateful. You realize, perhaps dimly, that this is not about nutrition at all. It is about compliance. A person who can be taught to eat without pleasure can be taught to live without choice. And when you understand that not intellectually, but in your body, you understand why the monastery works. It does not need chains. It does not need force. It teaches you gently and relentlessly that wanting less is safer than wanting at all. Work is prayer. Pain is proof. Monks and nuns under different weights. Work begins the moment the bowl is taken away. There is no pause, no digestion, no easing back into the body. The bell rings, and hunger is folded neatly into motion. Ora et labora, pray and work. Not pray then work. Not work so that you may pray. They are the same thing here. You are assigned without discussion, without explanation, without appeal. The rule has already decided where you belong today, and tomorrow, and likely for years to come. You do not choose work based on skill, preference, or aptitude. Wanting to be good at something is irrelevant. Enjoying something is suspect. Labor is not about productivity, it is about submission. For monks, the work spreads outward across the monastery's needs. Fields first, stones second, books third. The land must be tilled, walls repaired, roofs patched, paths cleared. Monks rise before dawn to tend animals, to dig and haul and plant, to wrestle order from soil that does not care about holiness. You feel it immediately. Your hands are still stiff from prayer. Your stomach is quiet but empty. The cold has not lifted yet, and the tools you are given, spades, axes, hoes, are heavy, older than you, shaped by use rather than comfort. There are no gloves. Blisters form quickly. Calluses follow. No one comments. Pain is expected. To mention it would be childish. For nuns, labor is narrower and heavier in other ways. Women's work is kept within walls more often than not. Laundry, weaving, spinning, cooking, cleaning, nursing the sick, teaching children, if the house is allowed to. The tasks repeat endlessly and invisibly, keeping the monastery alive without ever being seen as holy in themselves. A monk's work can be admired. A nun's work is assumed. You bend over wash tubs until your back aches. Cold water bites at your hands as you scrub habits clean. Soap is harsh, homemade, stripping skin raw. You spin thread until your fingers cramp, watching fibers twist into line while your thoughts are expected to do the same. Straight, tight, controlled. There is no clock you can see. Time is marked by bells, not hours. You work until you are told to stop. The absence of a clear end point changes how effort feels. You cannot pace yourself when you don't know how long you will be asked to endure. So you don't pace, you submit. The silence continues through labor. No chatter to distract, no encouragement. Only the sound of tools biting into earth, water sloshing in tubs, looms creaking, breath moving in tired lungs. Work becomes meditation not because it elevates you, but because there is nothing else to think about. For monks, the body is pushed outward. Strength is demanded. Endurance is praised quietly. A monk who works through pain without slowing earns unspoken respect. For nuns, endurance is quieter. There is no admiration for visible strain. A nun is expected to continue regardless, without recognition. Her labor disappears into cleanliness or nourishment for others. Her success is measured by absence. No dirt, no disorder, no complaint. Both are breaking in different directions. As the hours stretch, hunger returns, sharper now. Muscles begin to tremble faintly. Sweat forms despite the cold. The body asks questions the mind has learned not to answer. Can I stop? How long? Why? Those questions dissolve as soon as they surface. Because here, work is not something you do. It is something that is done to you. The work does not change. That is its power. Day after day, you return to the same motions, the same postures, the same strain in the same places of your body. The ground you dig today will be dug again tomorrow. The laundry you scrubbed clean will be soiled again by nightfall. The manuscripts you copy will take years to complete, and you may never see them finished. Progress is deliberately obscured. There are no milestones here, no sense of completion. The work exists in a constant present tense, always ongoing, never resolved. This strips labor of narrative. You cannot tell yourself a story about what you are accomplishing because there is no end point to aim toward. So you stop thinking of it as accomplishment at all. For monks in the fields, repetition is brutal in its simplicity. Dig, lift, carry, turn, dig again. Your body learns the motions quickly, too quickly. Muscle memory takes over, freeing your mind, and that is where the danger lies. An idle mind, even during labor, is risky, so the monastery fills it. You are expected to pray silently while you work. Psalms, memorized long ago, run on a loop in your head, not for inspiration, but for occupation. They keep your thoughts from wandering into forbidden territory. Memory, desire, resentment. Work plus prayer leaves little room for thought. That is the point. For nuns, repetition is even more constricting. Spinning, weaving, mending. These tasks are endlessly cyclical. The finished product dissolves into daily use. Clean becomes dirty. Order becomes disorder. Nothing you do accumulates into legacy. Your labor sustains others, not yourself. And because it is domestic, it is rarely acknowledged as sacrifice. A monk's calloused hands are evidence of discipline. A nun's raw knuckles are invisible. This difference seeps into you slowly. You begin to understand that some labor is meant to be seen, and some is meant to disappear. For nuns, disappearing is part of the vow, even if it was never spoken aloud. You grow tired in ways that rest does not fix. This is not the sharp fatigue of overexertion. It is the dull heaviness of monotony, the kind that settles behind the eyes and in the lower back, the kind that makes standing up after kneeling feel just a little harder each time. And still, the bell does not care. When it rings, you stop. When it rings again, you resume. You do not negotiate with it. Over time, your relationship with your body changes. Pain becomes informational only in the most basic sense. If something breaks completely a tool, a bone, it may be addressed. Everything else is background noise. Soreness, stiffness, hunger, cold, these are expected conditions, not signals. Ignoring them becomes habit. This has consequences. Your awareness of yourself narrows to function. Can I lift this? Can I carry that? Can I continue? As long as the answer is yes, no further reflection is needed. This is how labor erodes identity. You are no longer a person who does work. You are a body performing tasks. And bodies are interchangeable. If you falter, someone else will step in. If you are reassigned, the work continues without disruption. There is no sense that you are necessary, only that the role must be filled. This realization settles in quietly. At first, it feels humbling. Then it feels unsettling. Then, eventually, it feels normal. For monks, usefulness becomes virtue. Being needed by the monastery replaces any sense of personal calling. You are valuable because you function. For nuns, usefulness becomes invisibility. The best work is the work no one notices because it has erased every trace of disorder. Either way, labor becomes the lens through which worth is measured. Not intention, not effort, outcome. And the outcome is always obedience. By the time the next prayer hour interrupts your work, your mind feels smoothed down, worn by repetition. Thoughts don't stick the way they used to. Doubts slide off. Resistance feels like unnecessary friction. You welcome the interruption not because it brings relief, but because it breaks the monotony just enough to reset you. And then, after prayer, you return. Same work, same motions, same silence. This is how the monastery teaches endurance, not through dramatic suffering, through endless sameness. Eventually, something goes wrong. Not dramatically, not all at once. A muscle strains, a joint swells, a finger splits open and never quite closes again. In another life, this would be the moment you pause. You would rest. You would assess damage. You would decide whether continuing makes sense. Here, that instinct has been trained out of you. Pain arrives quietly, and it is absorbed just as quietly. You notice it the way you notice cold air or rough fabric. Inconvenient, persistent, but not negotiable. You adjust your movements slightly. Favor one side. Slow your pace by a fraction. You do not stop. Stopping would require explanation. Explanation invites scrutiny. Scrutiny leads to judgment, so you continue. For monks in physical labor, injury is almost inevitable. Blisters harden into calluses, then split again. Backs stiffen permanently. Knees grind. Hands lose dexterity from years of gripping tools not designed for comfort. There is a threshold at which injury becomes visible enough to warrant attention. But that threshold is high. You learn quickly where it is. A broken bone may be addressed. A deep wound may be cleaned. Fever may earn a brief rest. Everything else is endured. And even when care is given, it is minimal. Functional. Focused on return to labor, not recovery. You are not asked how you feel. You are asked whether you can continue. For nuns, injury is handled even more quietly. Much of their work, laundering, cooking, nursing, demands fine motor control and long hours in awkward positions. Fingers swell, wrists ache, backs curve forward from endless bending. Pain accumulates invisibly. A nun who complains risks being seen as fragile. Fragility is a moral failing here, not a medical one. So you learn to work through discomfort with practiced calm. You bind wounds yourself. You ignore dizziness. You adjust posture and keep going. No one praises this. No one needs to. Endurance is assumed. The deeper truth settles in slowly. Pain is safer than pause. Pain is internal. Pause is visible. Pain proves devotion. Pause invites doubt. This is how labor becomes a test not of strength, but of submission. You begin to fear stopping more than you fear injury. Stopping raises questions. Are you avoiding work? Are you indulging weakness? Are you placing the body above obedience? These questions hover unspoken, but they are understood. So you keep moving, even when fatigue turns your thoughts sluggish, even when your hands shake, even when hunger makes your vision blur briefly at the edges. You learn to push through these moments automatically, without drama, and something subtle happens. You stop recognizing yourself as the one making the decision. Work happens. You are present for it, that is all. For monks, there is sometimes a grim pride in this endurance. The ability to work through pain becomes a marker of spiritual maturity. You hear stories of brothers who labored until collapse, who carried stones with bleeding hands, who died at their posts. These stories are not warnings, they are ideals. For nuns, there are fewer stories. Their suffering is quieter, less documented, rarely mythologized. But it is no less real. In some ways, it is heavier because it passes without acknowledgement. Their bodies are consumed in service and then forgotten. Both paths lead to the same place. The body becomes expended, not violently, not suddenly, gradually. You learn to view yourself as a resource, something to be used carefully, efficiently, until it is worn down. There is no sense of ownership here. The body does not belong to you. It belongs to the monastery, to God, to the rule. You are a steward of something. You are not allowed to prioritize. By the time the bell rings again, calling you away from labor and back into prayer, you feel relief. Not because prayer is easier, but because it gives your body a different kind of pain. Kneeling hurts differently than lifting. Standing still hurts differently than bending. And variety here counts as mercy. You move toward the chapel with a body that aches and a mind that no longer questions why. Because the most dangerous thought you could have now is not "this hurts." It is "I could stop." After enough time, work stops feeling like something imposed. It feels like the natural state of being. You no longer think in terms of before work and after work. There is only work interrupted by prayer, and prayer that prepares you to work again. The distinction dissolves. Life flattens into obligation. This is not accidental. The monastery does not want you carrying an inner life that competes with your tasks. It wants your sense of self bound tightly to function. Who you are becomes indistinguishable from what you are assigned to do. For monks, this often settles into a kind of grim clarity. You are the one who tends the fields. You are the one who repairs walls. You are the one who copies texts. These identities feel solid because they are repetitive. They leave marks on your body. They shape your days so completely that there is little room left for anything else. You stop asking who you are beyond your labor. That question feels unnecessary now. For nuns, identity dissolves even further. Their labor is not named in the same way. They are not the weaver or the cook in a way that brings recognition. Their work is expected, constant, and deliberately hidden. The cleaner the monastery, the more invisible their effort. A nun is praised for humility, not skill, which means excellence must erase itself. You become good at leaving no trace, no evidence that effort was required. The floor is simply clean. The food simply appears. The sick are simply tended. Your work disappears into normality. And with it, you disappear too. This is where modern people would break. Not at the hunger, at the pain. But here where nothing you do feels like it belongs to you. There is no personal achievement, no credit, no moment where someone says, "This matters because you did it." Only usefulness, and usefulness is conditional. You are valued as long as you function, as long as you obey, as long as you do not require accommodation. When you falter, when age or injury slows you, your place becomes precarious. This is not cruelty, it is efficiency. The monastery is not designed to care for individuality. It is designed to persist, and you are expected to conform to that persistence until you no longer stand out. Over time, you internalize this. You stop evaluating yourself based on happiness or fulfillment. Those concepts feel childish now. You measure yourself by reliability. Did I rise when the bell rang? Did I complete my tasks? Did I avoid complaint? If the answer is yes, the day is considered successful. Anything beyond that is excess. This is how labor completes the monastery's work on you. Prayer trains your attention. Silence trains your isolation. Hunger trains your restraint. Labor trains your identity. Together, they remove the modern assumptions you arrived with that life should be meaningful, that effort should be rewarded, that suffering should have a clear purpose you can feel. Here, suffering does not need to feel meaningful, it only needs to be accepted. By the time the sun begins to lower again and the bell calls you once more toward evening prayer, your body is heavy and your mind is quiet, not peaceful, not content, just worn into place. You no longer imagine escape, not because you love this life, but because imagining something else would require energy you no longer have. Part 1 of 4 Obedience replaces conscience power without appeal. You begin to understand authority here long before anyone explains it to you. It is not taught in a lecture. It is not written in bold letters. It is absorbed, the way cold is absorbed by stone. The first thing you learn is this: nothing you do is private. Not your actions, not your time, not your body, not even your thoughts. At the center of the monastery stands the abbot, or, in women's houses, the abbess. Their authority is not symbolic. It is not advisory. It is total. They do not merely guide the community. They are the community, concentrated into a single will. You do not vote. You do not debate. You do not appeal. You obey. This is not presented as domination. It is presented as mercy. The logic is simple and relentless. Your will is flawed. Your judgment is corrupted by pride, fear, desire, habit. Left to yourself, you would choose comfort over holiness, ease over discipline, self over God. Therefore, surrendering your will is framed as liberation. You are not losing freedom. You are being relieved of it. At first, this sounds almost comforting. No decisions, no responsibility for outcomes, no burden of choice. But that comfort has a cost, because obedience here does not mean following reasonable instructions. It means aligning your inner life, your preferences, instincts, even moral reactions with commands that are not required to explain themselves. The abbot does not justify. The abbess does not persuade. They command. And command itself is considered holy. You feel this authority in small ways first. A reassignment of labor without warning. A correction for posture. A reminder about silence delivered without emotion. You are not asked whether this is fair. Fairness is not a category that matters here. What matters is whether you comply immediately and without visible resistance. Delay is disobedience. Hesitation is pride. Confusion is suspicion. So you learn to respond quickly. Yes, Father. Yes, Mother. The words come out automatically now. They bypass your thoughts. You say them before your mind has time to assemble an opinion. This is encouraged. Thinking slows obedience. For monks, obedience is framed as imitation of Christ's submission, humility, self-emptying. A monk who struggles with authority is said to be struggling with God Himself. Resistance becomes spiritual failure. For nuns, obedience carries additional weight. A woman who questions authority is not just disobedient, she is unruly, dangerous, suspect. Medieval theology already assumes women are more prone to temptation, or emotionally unstable, more in need of guidance. So a nun's obedience must be cleaner, quieter, more complete. A monk may wrestle inwardly and still be respected. A nun is expected to erase even the appearance of inner conflict. Authority reaches into the smallest details of your life. When you wake, when you sleep, what you eat, where you stand, what you touch, what you read, what you think about while you work. You are told when to speak. You are told when to be silent. You are told when to fast, and how strictly. Even prayer is not yours to shape. You do not choose how to approach God. The rule has already decided that for you. And if something feels wrong, deeply, instinctively wrong, that feeling is treated with suspicion. Because conscience here is not sovereign. Conscience is trained. You are taught that your moral instincts cannot be trusted until they have been reshaped by obedience. If an order feels cruel, humiliating, unnecessary, or unjust, the problem is not the order. It is you. This is the most dangerous idea you absorb. Not that authority exists, but that authority is always right, and your discomfort is evidence of sin rather than harm. Correction reinforces this constantly. Superior does not raise their voice. They do not threaten. They do not argue. They simply state, you will do this. You will accept this. You will reflect on your resistance. And you do. Because the structure allows no alternative. There is no grievance process, no external oversight, no safe way to object. The monastery is a closed system. Authority flows downward. Obedience flows upward. And in between, the individual dissolves. At some point, you notice that you have stopped asking why. Not because you have learned the answers, but because the question itself has begun to feel improper. Punishment here does not look like violence. That is the first thing you misunderstand. You expect anger, raised voices, harsh words, perhaps even cruelty. Something that would make authority feel obvious. Something you could point to and say this is abuse. You never get that. What you get instead is calm, measured voices, controlled expressions, language soaked in concern. This is what makes it effective. When you and you will, it is not framed as failure. It is framed as formation, a necessary adjustment, a loving correction meant to guide you back into alignment. The words are gentle. The effect is not. A monk who disobeys is rarely shouted at. He is corrected in front of others, or worse, corrected privately in a way that leaves no witness and no validation. He is reminded of his vows, of his weakness, of how easily pride disguises itself as principle. A nun receives correction even more delicately, soft voice, sympathetic tone, a reminder that her struggle is understandable but still unacceptable. This is not kindness. It is control wrapped in reassurance. Because when punishment feels gentle, you cannot justify resisting it. There is no villain to fight, only yourself. Corrections often involve humiliation, but humiliation carefully designed to appear constructive. You may be assigned menial tasks publicly. You may be required to eat last. You may be forbidden from certain duties as a sign that you are not yet trustworthy. You are not beaten. You are diminished, and because the community witnesses this quietly, without comment, the shame settles deep. No one consoles you. Consolation would undermine the lesson. You are expected to accept the correction gratefully. Gratitude is proof that it worked. Public humiliation is especially powerful because silence amplifies it. No one explains what you did wrong. No one whispers reassurance. You stand alone inside the knowledge that you have failed and that failure is now visible. For monks, this can feel like a challenge to overcome. Shame becomes fuel for greater obedience. For nuns, shame is heavier. Their reputations are more fragile. A nun who is corrected too often becomes suspect. Her character is quietly questioned. Her motives examined. She is watched more closely afterward. Correction follows her. And because obedience is tied to worth, punishment does not end with the act. It lingers. You replay the moment again and again. What you did, how you looked, how others must have interpreted it. Silence offers no relief from this rumination. Prayer interrupts it only briefly. You begin to pre-correct yourself. You adjust behavior in advance. You anticipate disapproval before it occurs. You censor thoughts before they form. This is when authority no longer needs to act. You act on its behalf. Punishment, here, not about deterrence, is about internalization. You are being trained to govern yourself the way authority would govern you, harshly, suspiciously, without mercy for deviation. And because this governance is framed as spiritual care, you come to believe that resisting it would be sinful. Better to accept shame. Better to be small. Better to obey without question. This is why obedience feels safer than thinking. Thinking creates risk. Obedience offers certainty. And certainty in a world this controlled feels like relief. Authority does not stop at what you do. That would be too easy to resist. It moves inward. This is where confession enters your life, not as relief, but as architecture. Confession is regular, mandatory, structured. It is not something you seek when burdened. It is something you submit to whether you feel burdened or not. The assumption is simple and absolute. If you do not think you have sinned, you are wrong. You kneel. You lower your eyes. You speak. Not freely, precisely. You are expected to account not only for actions, but for inclinations, thoughts, hesitations, fleeting resistances that never reach the surface. Silence has already trained you to monitor your mind. Confession formalizes that monitoring. What did you think when the bell rang? Did you resent the command? Did you question the task? Did you feel reluctance, boredom, irritation, hunger, pride? You learn to scan yourself constantly, not to understand yourself, to detect yourself. This is not introspection, it is inspection. For monks, confession is framed as spiritual hygiene, regular cleansing, a way to keep the soul ordered. The language emphasizes discipline and vigilance. A monk who confesses thoroughly is praised for honesty. But honesty here is not openness, it is exposure. For nuns, confession carries sharper edges. Women are assumed to be more inwardly turbulent, more susceptible to hidden sin. Their confessions are scrutinized closely. A nun who admits to doubt or resentment may be instructed to increase fasting or silence. A nun who fails to admit enough may be suspected of deception. Either way, she loses. Confession becomes a test with no correct answer. Too much self-accusation suggests instability. Too little suggests pride. So you learn to calibrate. You confess just enough to demonstrate humility, just enough to show awareness of your flaws, not enough to raise alarms. This calibration becomes another skill you develop quietly, carefully. You are not lying. You are curing. Over time, this changes how thoughts feel. Thought is no longer just a thought. It is potential evidence. You begin to evaluate mental events not by their truth or usefulness, but by their risk. Could this be interpreted as disobedience, as pride, as temptation? If so, it must be neutralized quickly, either through prayer or later confession. This creates a split inside you. One part experiences, another part watches. The watcher becomes dominant. You are rarely fully present anymore. There is always an inner observer taking notes, flagging impulses, preparing reports. This observer is not compassionate. It does not ask why you feel what you feel. It asks whether you are allowed to feel it at all. This is how authority becomes internal. No one needs to monitor you constantly because you are doing it for them. You confess not because you feel guilty, but because guilt has become routine, a baseline condition. You assume there is always something wrong. The only question is whether you have identified it correctly. Even moments of peace feel suspicious. Calm suggests complacency. Ease suggests laxity. Contentment suggests attachment. So you distrust them. Better to feel inadequate, Inadequacy keeps you compliant. The confessor listens quietly, offers brief guidance, assigns penance. The penance is rarely heavy. A prayer, extra silence, a small fast. The weight is not in the act. It is in the acknowledgement that your inner life is not your own. You stand up knowing that nothing inside you is beyond scrutiny, not even by yourself, and that knowledge changes you permanently. There is a moment quiet, unmarked, easy to miss when resistance finally stops. Not because it has been crushed, not because you have been convinced, but because it no longer feels useful. At first, obedience was something you performed. You followed commands while something inside you remained separate, watching, measuring, enduring. You told yourself that this was temporary, that you were choosing submission for a higher purpose, that somewhere beneath the discipline, your true self remained intact. But authority does not need to destroy that self. It only needs to exhaust it. After enough corrections, enough confessions, enough small humiliations delivered calmly and without apology, the effort of holding on begins to outweigh the benefit. Maintaining an inner disagreement requires energy. Defending a private sense of right and wrong requires confidence. Confidence here is constantly undermined. So you let go, dramatically, unconsciously. You simply stop checking your instincts against the command. When an order comes, you no longer feel the flicker of internal evaluation. You do not ask whether it is fair, reasonable, or necessary. You move. This feels lighter. That is the dangerous part. Obedience brings relief because it removes friction. There is no longer an argument inside you, no longer a split between what you were told to do and what you feel. The command arrives and action follows. Clean, efficient, quiet. For monks, this state is described as peace. A monk who obeys without hesitation is praised as spiritually advanced. His serenity is admired. His lack of inner turmoil is interpreted as closeness to God. He no longer struggles because he no longer resists. For nuns, this peace is more complicated. A nun who submits completely is considered safe. She is no longer watched closely. Her compliance renders her invisible. She becomes predictable, reliable, unthreatening. And in a system that fears women's autonomy, invisibility is a kind of protection. But peace, here, comes at a cost you only recognize in retrospect. Because one day, a thought arises faint, half-formed, and you realize you do not know how to answer it. What would I choose? The question surprises you, not because it is forbidden, but because it feels irrelevant. You try to imagine choosing freely a task, a rhythm, a way of being, and your mind produces nothing. There is no preference to consult, no internal compass to follow. Choice has become a language you no longer speak. Authority has replaced it. The abbot's will, the abbess's judgment, the rules structure, these have become your default orientation. When faced with uncertainty, you do not look inward, you look upward. What is expected? What is permitted? What would obedience look like here? This is not confusion, it is conditioning complete. You are no longer submitting yourself. There is no self left to submit. Modern people imagine that loss of freedom would feel like suffocation, panic, desperation, rage. They are wrong. It feels like quiet, like clarity, like no longer having to carry the burden of deciding who you are. This is why monasteries endure, not because they are gentle, not because they are kind, but because they offer certainty in place of agency. And for a human mind, stripped by hunger, silence, labor, and shame, certainty feels like mercy. By now, authority does not need to assert itself loudly. You anticipate it, you align with it, you correct yourself before correction arrives. The monastery does not own you by force. It owns you because you have learned to function without yourself. And when you realize that, truly realize it, there is no dramatic moment of grief. Just a dull recognition. You didn't come here to serve. You came here to disappear. You tell yourself you'd leave. That's the comfort modern people cling to. You imagine standing at the gate, deciding you've had enough, turning back toward warmth, noise, choice. You imagine the relief of it, the laugh you'd let out, the stretch of your limbs, the first meal eaten without rules attached. But that image is built on a mistake. You assume you'd still be. Eating a monastery is not about walking out. It's about re-entering a self that has been deliberately dismantled. By the time the rule has settled into your bones, the world outside no longer feels neutral. It feels loud, excessive, chaotic, indecent in its freedom. Choice feels overwhelming. Noise feels aggressive. Pleasure feels vaguely shameful. You would step outside and feel exposed, not liberated. Because the monastery doesn't just train obedience, it trains dependence on structure. Without the bell, time feels unanchored. Without the rule, decisions feel heavy. Without surveillance, you feel oddly unsafe. This is why many who left monasteries returned, not because they were forced, but because the silence followed them. They carried it into the world, into markets, homes, marriages, cities, a constant sense that something was wrong, that life was too loose, too uncontained, too full of unsanctioned feeling. The monastery had taught them how to endure. It had not taught them how to live. And that is the final, uncomfortable truth. The medieval monastery wasn't a retreat from suffering. It was a system for managing humans who believed suffering was the point. So when you say you wouldn't last a day, you're right. But not for the reason you think. You wouldn't last because you still expect life to answer you back. You still expect rest to restore you. You still expect silence to feel kind. And most of all, you still expect your inner voice to belong to you. And now, the bell is silent. The prayers are finished. The corridors are dark. The stone has cooled. You've walked through the monastery without taking vows. You've felt the weight without having to carry it forever. You've listened, and that's enough. If this journey helped you unwind, if these quiet histories help your mind slow and drift, you can gently support the channel by liking the video and subscribing only if it truly brings you peace. No pressure, no obligation. Just a small candle left burning. If you choose, wherever you are listening from tonight, whatever time it is for you, thank you for being here. You don't need to rise for the bell. You don't need to answer to the rule. You don't need permission to rest. Let your thoughts loosen. Let the silence feel kind again. Let the day fade. Good night. Sleep well.